I don't want to just be a good player. I want to change the game. I'd like to do a lot of what we are doing now, just on a bigger scale, help more people expand more to Southern Virginia and or into Maryland, expand the staff, grow capacity, make all types of decisions. I'm like, I don't know what the outcome of this is going to be. And it's not about getting it right all the time. I think it's more about learning when to pivot. That's what I wanted to create, an environment where people want to come to work to help people and are invested in the goal. When do you get to the point where you don't need to come to work at all?
Welcome to the Founding Partner Podcast. Join your host, Jonathan Hawkins, as we explore the fascinating stories of successful law firm founders. We'll uncover their beginnings, triumph over challenges, and practice growth. Whether you aspire to launch your own firm, have an entrepreneurial spirit, or are just curious about the legal business, you're in the right place. Let's dive in.
Welcome to Founding Partner Podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan Hawkins. Today we're talking with Margeaux Thomas, who is a business lawyer up in the D.C. area on the Virginia side. She's been at it for a little while. She's been at big firms, and now she's got her own firm, which she's had for a good long time now. So we're going to dive into all that. So Margeaux, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us about you, what your firm does, where you are, all that kind of stuff.
Well, thank you. I'm really happy to be here. So when people ask me what we do, I say we do business divorces. Basically, we assist business owners who are going through transitions with their clients, vendors, or business partners. And we just help them through that process. It involves a lot of tangential practice areas sometimes, depending on how contentious that relationship is or that transition. So that is our bread and butter. But we also help businesses grow. We do a lot of contract and transactional work as well. And we've been doing that for about 8 years. And prior to that, I was working at bigger firms doing a lot of the same thing, in addition to representing a lot of banks and financial institutions with their litigation, defending consumer claims. So yeah, happy to be here. We do Maryland, DC, and Virginia work mainly, but have some one-off matters going on around the country at any given time as well.
So I grew up as a business litigator doing business divorces too. So yeah, I know those issues. And then I started getting into law firm divorces, law firm breakups, and that's what led me down this path. But
those are the most contentious.
Those could get very contentious for sure. Not always, but sometimes, man, crazy. Okay, so tell me your firm. So it's who's with you? How many attorneys, staff? Is it in-office, virtual, combo?
So we have 6 full-time and 2 people on part-time kind of different deals. There are 2 attorneys that are full-time and 4 non-attorney staff, and then there's 2 other attorneys that work on matters kind of under their own different arrangement, but not full-time. And we are all remote. We have an office in the city of Fairfax where we will have a deposition or host a mediation every now and then, but we mostly go there to water the plants and just hold down the fort. We rarely meet there. And we have people everywhere. I have a couple of VAs that are one in South Africa, 2 in South Africa, 1 in the Philippines, and an attorney in Maryland, 1 in New York, 1 in North Carolina. And so we're kind of spaced about, little everywhere. But we have found a way to kind of have some community, even though we're all spread out. So I like that aspect.
So I want to go back to the beginning, but before we get there, for these attorneys that you've added as you've grown, first of all, have you always been remote?
I have always had a home office. And at some point at the very beginning, the staff used to work in the office and I would just pop in every now and then. I never really loved working in an office even before I started this firm. And then I was like, it just doesn't seem right to require people to come there. And I don't even want to go there. And I didn't go there very often. And I was like, I don't know what this is adding. So then I just said, look, we'll keep the office. We have, printers and things like that we need. But I don't think it was fair to make them come in every day. So, they can go if they want to. If they want to get out of their house, it's there. It's the option for the people local. And, I thought that was the best decision at the time, and people are happy with it.
That's cool. Everybody's got their own take on that. And some people, they're very firmly in their camps. But so you got all these attorneys that in your remote. So how did you find those attorneys and recruit them? Was it by accident or did you try to do it? Tell me about that.
That has been the hardest part of this journey is finding staff. And I feel like a large part of my day is dedicated to, looking at ads, talking to recruiters, figuring out, it's basically an advertising campaign to staff the firm. And I've been very intentional about the people that I want to add, and just finding them is just kind of, sometimes one of the attorneys that I've been working with for years, we found each other in a Facebook group of attorneys. Like I posted something and they responded, and we've been working together ever since. One of the attorneys, Bob, I mean, he worked at the first firm that I worked at and hired me, so that was kind of a natural transition when I started my firm. Another, the attorney in North Carolina, we found her through a recruiter. So all the different avenues, really.
I tell people, well, I think anybody that's run a firm for any period of time will all agree it's the people, and that's like the hardest part. I talk about this all the time. The other thing is, I sort of came to the conclusion, always be recruiting, always, because it takes way longer than you expect. Your timelines, it may take a little while for them to align when they're ready at the same time you're ready, and you just gotta do it all the time. So I bet you do spend a lot of time doing that.
A lot of time. A lot of time.
And so on that, another sort of follow up on that. So in terms of the types of roles you're looking to fill, I'm always curious from a sort of a strategy standpoint. Are they filling holes that you want filled in terms of capabilities, or is it just to add more of doing the same stuff? So for example, let's say, I'm just throwing stuff out. You needed like a trademark attorney, and you're like, all right, we're going to go find a trademark attorney. Or is it we just need more business litigators?
So it's not all attorneys, the recruitment. And right now I can tell you that I'm specifically interested in moving a current legal assistant paralegal to a more firm administrator role. She does a lot of that work anyway. She helps us with operations and just making the detailed procedures and training people on that and onboarding things. So I'd like to move her into that role. So we're looking for a paralegal who's experienced, who can take on a lot of the work that she's doing. I also have an ad running for a business litigator because we need the capacity. And after that, I will be hiring for a managing attorney because I would like to move out of the day to day work, and I need somebody to oversee that. And then after that hire, I'd like to hire a fractional COO that kind of works with the firm administrator to make sure that everything is lined up that she's doing. So I have a plan and some slots that I need to fill. I'm trying to find the right bodies or people to put in those slots.
I was going to say, that sounds good. I mean, you've got the plan and you know how you're doing it. You're going to do this first, next. That's really good. Some people it just comes at them and they do it on the fly. So that's good. Well, cool. So let's go back. So let's go way back. So to the beginning, and I'll say maybe after law school. So as you're coming out of law school, what kind of work were you looking to do? And was it business litigation back then, or was it something different?
I don't think anybody who goes to law school really knows, or maybe that was just my experience, but it's really hard to know exactly what you want to do until you're in it and doing it, because it all sounds great from the outside until you get into the nitty gritty, and then you're like, this is like mind numbing, or it's like nothing like I imagined it to be. And I kind of really was like, I like the criminal stuff because it's like fast paced and, there's some interesting issues. And, I just got hired at a firm that was like, we do business litigation. And the partner in that area was like, I want you to be, my protege. I want to teach you how to do this. And I was like, great. I have a lot of loans. This is a good paying job. I'll just let the criminal stuff go. So I took the job, and, it was just kind of all transition from there. He ended up leaving, and I ended up moving into an asbestos group, which I really disliked. And my work product was really bad because I was just really not into it. And then there was a partner who moved in who was doing bankruptcy work, bankruptcy litigation for commercial businesses. And I got to learn a lot from him. He eventually went on to become a judge. And then, I ended up changing firms and then was just firmly in could you run our, business litigation department? And it was a lot of the same kind of business divorces and things like that. So, and I just kind of, feel like doors opened, and sometimes that happens. You just kind of have to run through the door when it's open. And I think there have been some great opportunities that just kind of happen based upon just timing and being in the right place at the right time.
I'm with you. So I went to law school. I was convinced when I started law school, I wanted to be a plaintiff's trial lawyer. That's what I wanted to do. That's all I wanted to do. That's how I structured all my elective courses, blah, blah, blah. and I've never done it in a day of my life. Similar thing. You know, I couldn't get a job. It's very, very, very hard, at least that I've seen, to get a job at a plaintiff's trial firm straight out of law school. They want you to go work at a defense firm for a while. And so, I did that, but then I just said, I don't really like that. And I liked business, so I started going that way. And similar to what you were saying, some doors open, some other ones closed, and you just sort of eliminate things you don't like, and then all of a sudden you end up where you are. And so I'm with you, for anybody that's young, it's okay not to know where you're going, and you're probably going to pivot a few times along the way. So take me through. So you worked at a firm, at least right out of law school. How many firms did you work at before you started your own? And take me through that progression.
2. So I worked at the first firm for about 6 years, and the partner who had hired me, he ended up going to the firm that I ended up leaving and going to as well, which was directly across the street from where I was. And, it was just an opportunity to do a lot of the same work, but on a bigger scale. And I really enjoy the work. I like helping people solve a problem. I like working with sophisticated business owners who know their craft very well and have built a successful business, but don't know the law at all or how to figure out this issue that they're presented with. And so, I went across the street and did that work for many years. And I was right at the point where it was like a partnership conversation, and they were like, stay another year and you'll be up for partner. And at the same time, I was planning to start this firm with another partner at the firm. And, he pulled out very close to right when we were going to leave. And, I was like, maybe I should just stay. And somebody said to me, if you don't become partner, people always question why you never made partner. And that's always going to be like a thorn in your side or whatever. And I was like, maybe he's right. Maybe this is a bad decision. My husband was just like, if you don't leave now, you're never going to leave. This is your opportunity. You've got all the things lined up for you. You just got to take the step and believe that this is going to work out. And I was like, you're right. You're right. There's never going to be a perfect time. And I shouldn't, listen to all of that. That's just a distraction from something I knew that I could do if I just started it. So I took his advice and quit my job, which was a very difficult thing to do. And, I guess the rest is kind of history. I mean, we're out here for 8 years now. So it was certainly the best decision I made at the time, but it certainly was a lot of anxiety surrounding it.
So that's interesting. So you were planning to start a firm with another attorney, and so you had I guess you guys been planning, and then all of a sudden he or she's like, I'm out.
Yeah.
Wow. It's like rug pull. Rug pull.
Yeah. I was like, wow. So it's just me.
Did they stay at the firm or did they go somewhere else?
They ended up going in-house, which I think was a good move. And, they're happy there. They've been there since. And I think that was the move they were supposed to make at that time. So I'm happy it turned out that way. I wasn't at the time, but, I really like the autonomy of being the decision maker. And, I don't know. I mean, we got along. We still get along. We're still friends. But, you wonder how that would have affected our relationship.
Well, hopefully, as in-house, they're sending you work, hopefully. But yeah, so you're planning to do it, and then all of a sudden the person backs out, and then all of a sudden you're like, maybe I don't do it. And so was it, your husband, I guess, helped give you a push, and then you just said, all right, I'm just going for it, right? And so it sounds like maybe you had already sort of set up at least some of the infrastructure that you were going to be able to step into.
Very little infrastructure, and that's what I like about starting law firms. I mean, you really don't need that much. I mean, it's not like a retail store. It's not a restaurant. Like, you don't need a lot of staff. You don't need a lot of equipment. I had like a laptop. I was working out of my house. I didn't even have this office set up. This is like a bedroom in my house, but I didn't even have this. I was just working on the dining room table and my cell phone. I was like, what do you really need? Like, this is very low buy-in to do this. So I was like, I don't want to sign any long-term contracts. I don't know how many clients I'm going to bring in. I don't know how much money I'm going to make. And my twins were 2 when I started this firm. So I had, daycare expenses that were through the roof. So I really wanted to keep it as lean as possible for as long as possible.
Had you saved up sort of a war chest that could give you some runway?
I used retirement savings, but I ended up not needing the retirement savings. Like, I took it out thinking I would need it, but my first year ended up being profitable, and I didn't need to use any of the money that I thought I was going to need to use to keep it afloat.
So when you started, were you able to take clients with you, or did you start with none?
So I had no clients, and I was not into business development. I was just like a grinder. That was my job, like fill hours. And I didn't know how to build a firm or create business and really never developed that in the firm whatsoever. And there was one client that I was working with on a very big case that was going to go to trial a few months after I left. And when I left, they said, we want to continue to work with you and the firm that you're leaving. And the firm that I was leaving was planning to replace me with another associate. And the owner of that business said, I don't want you to do that. And I didn't know he was going to do that. I mean, I left, I gave my notice and left before he made that decision. But I mean, that made my whole year because I was still billing the rates that I was billing at the firm. I mean, it just kind of fell into place. And I wasn't even thinking that that was a possibility. That wasn't even on my radar. I was just like, I'm just going to leave it all and start anew, you know? And he said, you know this case more than anybody. Why would I know what I'm doing, like I'm not letting you walk away from this at this point and bring somebody who doesn't know anything up to speed and we're a few months from trial. Absolutely not. You're on the case. And I was like, thank you. In fact, I just had lunch with him a few weeks ago and was like, that changed the trajectory of my first year, that decision that you made. And he was like, it wasn't even a question in my mind.
Wow. So, okay. In your mind, you were very fortunate that that happened, but in your mind, you were going to go with no clients. So what were you going to do to go get clients? What was your plan?
My plan was to tell absolutely everybody that I know what I do and go to lunches, go to happy hours, join every networking organization I can, and just pound the pavement and say this is what I do. And if you know anybody who needs this service, I was in I was doing all the things. I mean, my whole day was like traveling around meeting people, and then in the evenings and weekends, I would do the work that I could generate during the day. And I was just like, if you somebody just said that if you tell enough people what you do, you will get the work. You just got to be telling people like somebody, and it really does work like that. I mean, I was looking for a space outside of my home or something. Somebody said they had an open office, and I went to talk to them, and they were like, well, by the way, I'm being sued on blah blah blah, and I don't really like my attorney. Do you think you can handle it? It was a huge case. I had no idea, and he was like, here it is, and transferred it to me that day, which was insane to me. And I was like, wow, like I wasn't even here talking about that. I was here to look at an office. And, we ended up settling the case. It went well. I mean, that was another year of funding. Just kind of opportunities like that kind of just presented themselves.
So true. You just got to get out there. You know what I tell people, it's really two principles. Nobody knows who you are, and those that do don't remember you. So you just got to constantly be out there and reminding people who you are, what you do. And like you said, stuff will just start coming. That's the other thing I believe is, if you put it out there, the universe will respond, but you got to do stuff. It's not just going to happen. So it sounds like you did bring the one client, but you did that as well. I mean, you were out there just hitting the pavement, it sounds like.
I mean, I think those are tough years. And, I try not to have any regrets, but, I made a lot of sacrifices during that time frame to work that hard to get the phone to ring. Like, that was my life. You know what I mean? I spent a ton of time doing that.
Well, let's talk about that. So I've got twins also. They're 14 and a half. And one of them had some very, very serious issues out of, in utero. Basically, she was born with cancer. And so it was just, oh my gosh, it was crazy. She's fine now. All that's good. But even without that, twins, that's a lot. And, twin toddlers. So how did you make it work? You're grinding it during the day and the night. You got twins. When mine were born and we were going through all that, I felt like I was like a walking zombie because I never got any sleep. And I frankly, there are huge chunks of that time that I just really don't even remember because I don't know if I was barely awake. Tell me how you were feeling. What was it like for you?
I had the same experience. Like, I feel like it's like a trauma response where you forget because it was just the sleep deprivation and just how difficult it was. I don't even remember the first year of that. And I had a very difficult pregnancy and was on bed rest, and they were born early and they went into the NICU, and it was a whole thing. And, it went on for a long time. And then they were doing occupational therapy to try to keep up with where kids were at their age range because they were born so prematurely. So, I mean, the pregnancy was a hard part, but that was just the beginning of a lot of things that happened after that were very difficult. And then 2 years later, I mean, that was barely when I was recovering from the sleep deprivation, I'm like, yeah, let's start this firm. I do feel like it was the time to do it, and there was never going to be a perfect. But I do think I also sacrificed a lot of time with them and with my husband and with my family in order to make it work because I was working every weekend. I would try to work on their naps and I would try to work when they went to sleep, but you really don't have the energy that you have to put into your relationships when you are doing that. And now that maybe it's presumptuous to like compare us lawyers to like elite athletes, but in order to perform at your best, you can't be burning the candle on both ends, right? You got to get 9 to 10 hours of sleep. You got to stay hydrated. You got to take care of yourself. And I was doing very little of that because I was very much like, I've got to make this work. I will do whatever it takes to make the phone ring. And that was my sole focus at the time that, a lot of other stuff I feel like was not, I was dropping some balls in other like areas that I couldn't see.
Well, I mean, that's important for people to realize. You've created a successful firm, and from the outside it looks like a very impressive firm, but they don't see those early years where you were just grinding it, and often that's what it takes. Sacrifice and grinding and all that. So how did you, in the early years you were grinding it out, and you probably still work hard today, but how did you over the years start to structure your firm and set it up so you could, the new book, buy back some of your time or whatever, get back some of your time to focus on some of these other things? How did you do that, and how did that evolve over time?
Well, it started with just like one assistant, and I was scared to death to hire him because I'm like, what if I don't have to work? What if I can't pay him? But I hired him, and that was a great hire. And I was like, man, bought back a lot of my time. Like I was still doing a lot, but like that one hire made a huge difference. And I hear so many people say I don't have the funds to hire this person. And I certainly didn't, but I hired them and it made up for itself. It just kind of evened out. And then, I started getting rid of stuff or narrowing the focus to things that I really am not good at or don't like doing and figuring out people who love to do those things and surrounding myself with those people. So, hiring a really good bookkeeper, I was doing all of that myself. I'm not great with numbers and accounting and spreadsheets. And I've heard you talk about spreadsheets and how you love them in other episodes. That is not my thing. I am not great at Excel. Like I hate spreadsheets, but they love spreadsheets and like let people do what they love to do. So, find those people and, the operations right now, the process stuff. I don't want to take screenshots or Loom videos of processes that we do. I understand the importance of it so that I don't have to answer the same questions over and over and how we can, drag and drop somebody into a position without having to start from scratch every time. So, finding somebody who loves to do that. And we have somebody who loves to do those things. So, it's just kind of been an evolution of that, just identifying those people and those things that I can offload. And, I haven't got to, I'm starting to get to the point where it's like stuff that I like to do, but I know that I need to offload. And that big thing is like the practice of law. Like I'm still kind of spending a lot of time working on the administration of the firm and still handling cases at the same time, which is very difficult.
It is hard to litigate and have to go to court and go to a hearing, deposition, and spend the time you need on your firm, for sure. I know it. It's what you described there. Others call it the who, not how. You find the people that can do those things. You don't learn how to do it. I tell a lot of brand new law firm owners, the first thing I recommend is go outsource your bookkeeping. Just get that off your plate, because I tried to do it. I mean, I like spreadsheets, but I hate the bookkeeping stuff. And I tried it for the first couple months, and I was like, man, I spent more time trying to figure out QuickBooks, wasting more time in that than it would have just to pay somebody else to do it. And it's not that expensive. It really isn't. I mean, it frees up, I don't know how many hours of your time that you can then go either work clients or go get clients. It's a multiplier effect, and then you just go from there. So people out there that they're fresh out, go get a outsourced bookkeeper immediately. Don't do that stuff. So it sounds like, you've experimented, or you've just figured it out over the years about, offloading stuff. And maybe you're at the point now, this is another sort of pivotal moment, I think, in a lot of law firm founders. I guess evolution is the point where it's offloading the actual legal work. So where are you in that journey? or have you been able to offload a lot of it, or is it a struggle? I know some call it, they say it's sort of an identity issue. They have an identity crisis with it because they're like, I'm the lawyer, I got to do this stuff. What's your mindset?
I find it very difficult, but not because I feel like I'm the lawyer, I need to do it, but because, I think we kind of get into if it's not done the way that I would do it, that it's not right. And I have to constantly tell myself, like, this is a way it could be done. And, there's no like really bad things that would happen if it got done this way. I would do it a different way. But, you kind of have to get past that, let it go, and I'm somewhat of a perfectionist. So I'm like, you know, if there's any kind of typo or anything, or the organization, I could spend a lot of time rewriting somebody's work that probably most people would consider to be fine, right? But my standard is a lot higher than that, and the clients half the time would never even know, right? But there's just this, maybe because I came from bigger law firms. I mean, there would be so many people who review briefs. I mean, there was no room for error here. There were so many levels of review, and at the end of the day, our client at the banks was another lawyer who would also be looking at it, right? So we were in federal court. There weren't, typos or missing this or miscite. I mean, there was no room for that. So it's hard for me to review work and see any kind of inconsistency and not be like, what about this and that and this and that? And, it's hard to get out of that because that takes a lot of time because you have to be in the details of the case to even be able to make a lot of these observations. But, I think bringing in a managing attorney to look over the more junior attorneys will hopefully shift that. And I won't be the person like going over the cases to make sure that the proper steps are taken. At least I hope so.
I think for most lawyers, this is a huge problem. We've been good in school. We've probably been at the top of the class most of our life. Then you get in law school, and then you get into these firms where it's just, you cannot make mistakes. And we probably a lot of us have perfectionist tendencies, and then they get amplified through some of this gauntlet that we run through. And then it's hard to come off of that stuff. It's funny you talk about all the reviews of these briefs. It's funny, you've probably experienced this too. I remember, you'd write a brief, you're the junior or whatever, maybe in the mid, and then it comes back with some change, and then it goes up and another change, and by the end of it, it gets changed back to what it was in the beginning. A lot of times, you're like, oh my gosh. But yeah, that is a huge challenge, I think, for all lawyers. And are you taking any steps to try to get over that? Are there any methods or any advice you have for others that might be thinking about it?
I think the biggest step is just allowing room for other people's method, right? Because I think it's easy to think that whatever way I would do it is always right. And, that's not true. So, just kind of just internal discussions that I have with myself when reviewing things, part of it. And I think that's the big part. And, I was in a lot of business coaching, and they said, you've got to be okay with the 80%. It doesn't need to be 100. And I remember there was this big dental business dispute going on that was very litigious, that went on for years. And I remember it was a husband and a wife dentist, and the husband was the main dentist, right? That had all the awards, and then the wife was like the more back office person. And one day we asked him, like, how good of a dentist is your wife, right? And he was like, she's not me, but no client would ever know. Like, she's good enough that there's no like big errors, like nobody's like bleeding to death, like there's no malpractice claims. But to me, I look at her work and I'm like, that's sloppy. But to the client, it all works. And I'm like, that's the difference. Like the client, it's good enough, right? And it's hard for me to be okay with good enough, but I think that's part of the process, right? 80% and 100% aren't that big of a deal at the end of the day if we can get to the same result.
Yeah, I agree with you. Real quick, thanks for listening. If you're getting any value out of this podcast, please take 2 seconds to hit the subscribe button and leave a 5-star review. It would really mean a lot to me. Now back to the show. So as you sit here today, take me through sort of a typical day or week. How much time are you spending on the business and versus in the client work?
I can say today I woke up at 6. I had a hearing at 11. I did a little bit of work before this podcast. And, I'm going to schedule in some recruiting calls after this. And, that's my typical day. I don't do any initial drafting anymore. which is nice. So most of my time is spent reviewing things, so it's quicker than it would be. And I would say most of the billable time is not mine at this point because I'm not doing any of the initial legal research. My role in any of the client meetings is more strategy based, not the actual, and they all accept that. Like, all I'm coming in to do is say, I think we should move this direction or that direction. And then, I'm lucky enough to have people who can execute on that, and I can just kind of review it at the end of the day, which I like. But I think the next step is really to move out of even that piece.
Yeah, I saw a very successful lawyer who's built a big firm with others talk about, sort of the journey. I think one of the questions asked was, what do you attribute sort of the success to or whatever? And he said that he basically blocked off one day a week to work on the firm. And he kept it religiously. I'm going to work on the firm, not in client work. It's on the business type stuff. And he says, don't do it on a Friday because you'll end up with a 3-day weekend every weekend. So I've been trying to do that. And it's just, I block it on my calendar. I'm going to be doing, stuff for the firm, not client work. And I've been doing that for a little while. We'll see how it turns out. What about you? Do you have periods where you say, I'm just going to work on the firm, or is it just you fit it in wherever you can?
I wish I was better at time blocking, but I really just fit it in wherever I can. I think it's helpful to have an accountability partner because I have a business coach that I meet with. So I'd like to show up and not say I haven't done anything since the last time we met. So that kind of like gets me to do something. And, I really see the benefit of some of the administrative changes, more so than some of the, more so than the legal work. The legal work is there, but like, hiring a person or onboarding a person or letting go a person has, a huge effect on, the firm. And those things are so important that I spend a lot more time on those than I did previously.
So we talked about sort of what you did in the early days of your firm to go get cases. What sort of stuff do you do now to generate the work for your firm?
I think Google, like most would say, is a big part of that. I think we have somehow amassed enough Google reviews that we get a fair amount of leads just, I mean, it's not even paid advertising, just from people reviewing our work or seeing us online and finding us that way. And, I'm not great with figuring out how Google works and how to increase that and exactly how many people are looking. And, I haven't spent a ton of time looking at that, but, I do track how many leads we bring in and how many conversions we have in a month. And I mean, it's dramatic based upon how many more reviews we've gotten and how that's increased. So a lot comes from that. I do a lot of podcasts. I'm on the board of a couple of organizations that I'm very involved in. I've met a lot of people through those avenues. I don't know. It's weird that I feel like I'm at a point where I feel like Northern Virginia, Fairfax County is the biggest county in Virginia. And whenever we get a new case, I'm like, who's on the other side? And like 90% of the time, we know who that person is because we're in this niche, right? So I think we've just been doing it long enough that people associate our firm with that kind of work, which I don't know what day that happened or what year that happened, but it's kind of cool to see that develop because, I know opposing counsel and I say to our clients before we even know who it is, like, we're probably going to know who that person is. And as soon as they enter an appearance, I can give you the explanation of how that's going to affect the trajectory.
So I'm not going to ask you how old you are. So don't. But I've always heard it's the golden years of a lawyer's career is like sort of like 45 to 60, and it might be a little sooner, a little later, depending on when you graduate law school, whatever. But part of that is you've gotten enough reps, you're good at being a lawyer, but also you've got a foundation of enough relationships out there that you've been out there for a while. Your opposing counsel, you got a reputation. But then also the people that are sort of the decision makers are out there, they can hire you, and they're sort of at the age where they can hire you. And it's, I do feel like if you can just do these things, you got to do stuff, but if you do them long enough, and if you can just make it sort of that period, then, and you got to keep doing them, you can't stop, but then you can just, harvest all the fruits of your labor for a while at least. I don't know if I feel like that in my career now. I just feel like all the stuff that I did, 15 years ago is sort of coming to fruition now. I don't know. Have you ever thought about that?
I do. I mean, there were some really tough days at the beginning, and I feel like I'm now reaping the benefits of some very difficult decisions and, a lot of weekends and a lot of nights and evenings and sacrifices. So I'm happy to be here doing that.
So I want to shift a little bit. I know sports. I think growing up, what maybe still is really important to you. You've athlete. You've been a coach, and so I really am fascinated by the folks that are really into sports, and because they're usually high performers in business as well. So I don't know. Are there any lessons that maybe you've learned from all your time in the sports field that you've brought into building your law practice?
I love sports, and it has definitely been a huge part of my life since I was a very young child. Me, my brother, my dad was a prolific athlete, and I'm still competing. I'm a competitive swimmer now, and I think there are so many takeaways from sports. Like, even if you're not great at sports, you don't love sports, I just think there's so many things that I've learned about life through sports, right? And preparation is one of them. Like, what really matters is what you do before you get to the trial or before you get to whatever the key moment is, right? I just, it is scary to me when people just show up like, I'm just here. I'm like, well, what? Like, it's just like mind boggling to me. Like, you know, this isn't the day, the day was 2 weeks ago when you were figuring out what you're going to do today, right? So, I think that's something I get from sports. I'm very competitive. So, I just want to improve. And it's not even so much against other people. It's just like, what can I build, And how can I push myself? And, that feeling of just being out of your comfort zone is something that I reach for. I feel a little bit of comfort being in that place where you're like coming down the roller coaster and your stomach is like sinking. Like, that's where I want to be because that makes me know that I'm doing something forward focused, right? Progression, something that I've not always done. I think that just being stagnant is like scary to me. Just that's the feeling that I don't want. Like, I just don't want to go to work every day and come home and say that was it. Like, I want to change people's lives. I want to build something that's never been built. Like, and I think I got that at a young age from sports. Like, I want to change the game. I don't want to just be a good player. I want to change the game. Like, that was just kind of like something that was instilled in us from a very young age. Like, it's, you got to be better than the best type of thing. And I think I apply that to everything. I'm a very high D personality, so I think it all kind of weaves in there. But I apply that to the firm. Like, how do we build this great culture remotely? I mean, people feel like you can't do that, right? But we can do that. We just need to figure out how to do that, and let's be the best at it, right? So let's drill down on what we need to do to accomplish that. So I think there's so many takeaways every day from my sports life and the firm.
Well, I'll tell you, if you're a competitive swimmer, I imagine that you have to learn to put up with pain and just push through. Even when you want to quit, you just got to keep going. I mean, I can't imagine. I don't know. What kind of events do you do on the swimming? Are they long distance or?
So I did a 2.4 mile in St. Croix in November. I did a mile in Southern Virginia the month before. And I did three other just like swim meets, so short distance races. And I've got a lot on the plate for this year. I'm hoping to go to Colombia in a few months and do an ocean man swim. So, you know, there's this motto like, don't stop when you're tired, stop when you're done. Like, that's what I'm saying to myself when I'm swimming. Like, I know you're tired, but we're not done, right? So that's the same motto that I apply to the firm. We're not there. And just this whole, we've done it that way all the time. Let's just continue to do it is something that I really try to move away from as much as possible. We got to do it differently, and we got to, raise the bar, right?
So as you self-reflect, what would you say sort of are your strengths that have given you what you need to build this thing?
I think about that a lot. I think that's a really tough question. And I think a lot of people can say I'm really good at this one thing, and I'm not sure I've figured that out. What I say, and I don't know, maybe I'm misphrasing this, but I'm good at identifying the people who are good at those things and putting myself near them, right? Like, I don't feel like I'm the best rainmaker, but I've met some people who I'm like, wow, you're a hell of a rainmaker. Like, let me position myself near you because, one, I'd like to pick up some of those traits, but two, you're going to have some overflow. Like, there'll be some stuff you can't take. And, it's the same thing with other things. Like, I know that I'm not good at this process thing, but I can figure out who is, I know I'm not a great bookkeeper. I hate spreadsheets, but somebody is. So I think it's just finding the things for me that I'm not great at and finding the people that I can position myself with that can help me overcome those hurdles. If that is a skill, that's something that I spend a lot of time trying to figure
I think that is a skill. Maybe this is a good time to say, but I think one of your sons, I think, thinks you're like the best negotiator ever, right?
out.
So yeah, I saw that on your website. I thought that was so cool. So for those of you out there who don't know what I'm talking about, that on your website, I'll call it like a web comic. It's like you as a superhero, and you're called the negotiator. Did your son do that?
Yes, my son made a comic, and I put it on the website, and it made his day. But it's surprising how many clients like come to consults and was like, "I read that comic, and that's so cool." And I just think it adds a little bit of just comedy to a very kind of litigious atmosphere, which can be very stressful. So I think it's good to have that comic relief.
Yeah. So what do your kids think about you and being a lawyer? Do they talk about it at all? Do they have any thoughts?
I'm not sure they want to be lawyers. I don't think that much, but I think honestly, I think they would like more time. I still spend a lot of time in the firm, and I think they wonder like how many people do you have to add until you're just like free, in their world. And I certainly don't know what that number is, but they ask me that, and I'm like, you know, when do you get to the point where you don't need to come to work at all? Like, and I'm like, I don't know the answer, but I'm working towards that one day. So,
One day.
but
It's funny. My twins, when they were younger, they would just hear that I'm a lawyer, I'm a lawyer, I'm a lawyer, and it took them a while. And finally, one day they said, "I always thought you said you're a liar, not a lawyer." I guess it was my southern accent. I don't know. Like, no, there might be people out there that would call all lawyers that, but yeah, I thought that was pretty funny. So yeah, so here's another question. So for those out there, that are thinking about it or maybe have started their firm, I always like to ask, I guess, sort of, lessons maybe that you've learned along the way, maybe something that you would not have done or something that maybe you would have done sooner than you ultimately did it as you look back on your law firm.
I definitely live by the burn the boat philosophy. I think that you just really got to jump in with both feet. And I think that a lot of successful entrepreneurs just are a little bit more able to take risk than a lot of other people. They might not necessarily be all that skilled, but they're willing to push the envelope and take risks that other people aren't willing to do. So, I wish I had burned the boat a little bit sooner, maybe. Like I was really terrified of what that looked like, but I really love it. And I don't believe that entrepreneurship is for everybody, but if there are people out there who are really thinking about it and stuck in the back of their mind and they always feel like I should do this, I just really want to like say, like there is no perfect time. Like you just got to kind of jump out there.
So one thing that I've struggled with, and I know others do, is self-doubt. So I mean, you burned the boats, you took the risk, you've done it. Have you ever had to deal with self-doubt along the way, thinking maybe you made a mistake here or there, and how do you deal with that?
All the time. I make all types of decisions. I'm like, I don't know what the outcome of this is going to be, but and it's not about getting it right all the time. I think it's more about learning when to pivot. Like when you make the wrong decision, recovering from it. Right? The same in sports. We're not going to have perfect games, but if you can alter what you're doing to like make it not so bad of a loss, or that's what it's about. Like just not being so down that you just keep going down this negative trajectory. Like if there's like a toxic person in your work environment, you just can't let that, get bigger and bigger and take over, right? So I have lots of self doubt. I mean, I spent a lot of time looking in the mirror saying, I've got this, I can do this. Like, I'm a wolf, not a sheep. Like, all types of motivational things. And, I can embody that because I tell myself everybody has self doubt. We're all looking in the mirror like, can I pull this off? Type of thing.
Well, it's funny, not you, but me, person, you have this self-doubt, and you're like, I'm not doing it, I'm not doing it, I'm not doing it. And then all of a sudden you stop and it's 3 years later and you look back and you're like, damn, I actually did a lot there. I'm always caught up in the moment. I forget sort of what happened or where I came from. So you've talked about just how early on and still it's just law is a busy all-consuming type career. Even if you're not trying to build a business, you add that on top, and you're just busy all the time. And in addition to being busy, it can be very stressful. And so, what are some ways that you manage the stress part of it?
Well, swimming has certainly been my outlet. Like, I spend a lot of time in the pool, and I like it because it's a way I can't be on my phone. It's just me looking in a mirror of myself for hours on end, especially in long swims. And I think that that's very therapeutic for me and kind of helps me maintain balance away from my kids and the law. I mean, it's just kind of like my time. And, it's very difficult for me to take a day off, but it's not very difficult for me to swim, right? I'm on a team. They expect me to be there. They meet at a certain time. So for me, like a commitment or accountability is a huge piece of it. I know that about myself. Like if I put something out there in the universe and tell somebody I'm gonna be there, I'm gonna do this, I will do it. So that's key for me to have that sense of community and have people who are waiting for me to be there or ask if I don't show up, where am I? So that helps me kind of maintain balance having that.
You just said something that I've just never thought of. So I work out every day. That's sort of my outlet, but I never swim, and I always have earplugs in. I'm listening to music or podcasts or something, and I've never thought about when you swim, you can't have earbuds in, you can't have your phone with you. You just got to do it. That's actually, I may take up swimming.
They actually have underwater ear pods.
Oh no! Don't tell me that. Don't tell me that.
I've never used them, but people have them, so they figured out a way.
So, there's ups and downs as we've talked about in owning your own firm and being an entrepreneur. But as you look back, sort of what do you feel is sort of the best thing about it in your mind?
I like the ownership of it, to say that, to look back at where I started and to see people who have bought into the vision that was in my mind for so long. When my staff members say, I like the community that we have here, like more than anything else. Like, I like the people that I work with, I like the clients that we work with, I feel supported. I mean, that's huge to me. That's what I wanted to create, an environment where people want to come to work to help people and are invested in the goal. Like that's something I never could have imagined that I would be able to build on my own. And looking at that just makes me very, very happy at the end of the day.
So you've created a really nice firm. You've done a lot. You've sacrificed a lot. You put a lot of time and sweat and energy into it. As you sit here today, what's the vision for the future? What 10 years out, 15 years out, what do you think you want this thing to look like?
I'd like to do a lot of what we are doing now, just on a bigger scale, help more people expand more to Southern Virginia and or into Maryland, expand the staff, grow capacity. I'd like to do more subscription work. We're just like on the we're at the very beginning of growing that piece, which I think has a lot of potential. And I know there are people who you've talked to on your podcast who are very much into that. And I'd certainly like to move more in that direction. I do see lots of issues with the billable hour that I've always felt inside was just not the best way to do it. So I think that's the future of law, like getting away from this terrible billable hour requirements. And I mean, we don't have billable hour requirements, but just billing people by the hour, I think in and of itself has a lot of issues. So that's our goal.
So the subscription thing, let's talk about that. So, I mean, you're basically a litigation firm. I know you probably do some advisory work. How do you envision implementing a subscription service into your firm?
So right now we just have clients that can call, they pay a flat fee, and they just have our availability. They can call, we can ask questions, but then depending on what they're like, if they get sued or they need some document drafting, we convert it to a flat fee or a billable hour. But I think that there's some way to do litigation on a subscription basis, so it doesn't convert to a billable hour or flat rate at some point. Like I think that there's some way to kind of just figure out, what is the likelihood of how many depositions are you likely to have, right? And how much is that going to cost us? And how much time are we going to put into this? And what is a monthly amount that you could pay that would sustain this? And we want to make long-term clients, not just litigation clients, but we want to provide value through the life cycle of people's business. And how do we do that over time without them having this up and down and up and down and unpredictability of the billable hours, right? And there's a lot of people who feel like that can't be done in litigation. And whenever you say that, people are like, no, that's just like not possible. And most of the people who do it aren't doing it in litigation, from what I find. But I think that that is the natural transition of this.
Well, if you figure that out, if you figure out how to do litigation in a subscription model, you're going to kill it. I tell you that, because I do think that's challenging for sure. I'm not going to say impossible, because I don't think anything's impossible. But yeah, that'll be really cool. I'm very interested in subscription models, and I do think they have a place in just about every firm and every practice. Whether it's to the actual case litigation part, I don't know, but I think you can have a book of clients that are on some sort of subscription type model and then call you and hopefully avoid litigation. So yeah, I really think that is the wave of the future. So, well, cool. So real quick, if I'm a lawyer out there and I'm thinking about starting a firm, what is the top piece of advice you'd tell me?
Just do it.
Would you say don't do it?
I said just do it.
Just do it.
Just start.
Yeah.
I think we can just get bogged down in a lot of details that just, can stop us from making decisions. And I found that some of the most successful entrepreneurs that I deal with have a very unique way of making decisions. They make very high level decisions, and they can do so with a lot less information than perhaps others. And, I think that as lawyers, we're just like programmed the opposite way. We just need all this information and like every contingency. And that is just like, can stop you in your tracks from making decisions that would be very good for
I agree with that. Well, Margeaux, this has been real fun. Thank you for coming on. It's been fun getting to know you and your journey there. For anybody out there that wants to get in touch with you or wants to find you, what's the best way?
you. So feel free to reach out via email. You can reach us at team@thomaslawplc.com or our website, thomaslawplc.com. We're all over LinkedIn, so I'd love to connect with anybody there. I post a lot of content on there, and happy to speak to anybody who's interested in starting a firm. I love entrepreneurship, so I'm a huge promoter of it.
Yeah. Well, cool. Well, again, thank you for coming on. It's been fun.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Founding Partner Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts to stay up to date on the latest episodes. You can also connect with Jonathan on LinkedIn and check out the show notes with links to resources mentioned throughout our discussion by visiting www.lawfirmgc.com. We'll see you next time for more origin stories and insights from successful law firm founders.